Well, hello and welcome to another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop. And this video, I'm actually going back to my roots. I started off as I got invited to work at a Rolls-Royce and Bentley service centre, ended up having a relationship that lasts to this day with various people at the factory in research and development and various departments, drivetrain, etc. This is a Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud 3. It was by this time Mulliner Park Ward, coach-built car. And it's right in my sweet spot, really. But this particular car is very interesting because it's, up until very recently, a one-owner car that's done a genuine 26,000 miles only from new. Can you imagine? What would you have to pay for a coach-built Rolls-Royce today? Not that they do such a thing, but a Rolls-Royce with some extra special bells and whistles on. 300, 400,000 pounds? Imagining ordering one of those new and then hardly using it. That's money. Anyway, it was bought by the gent in 1965, 1964, and it's towards, this was the end of an era. This was the last Rolls-Royce, apart from the state limousines, the Phantom 6, this was the last Rolls-Royce mainstream model that had a frame underneath it, a chassis with all the running gear pinned on it, and then the body, you could either have Rolls-Royce's own body, which is called the standard steel, or the Bentley equivalent, same car, different badges, or you could have a coach-built car where the whole chassis and running gear was delivered to your coach builder of choice, and then they designed and built a body for it to your tastes. And there were some incredibly elegant bodies on the S1, S2 and S3 Rolls-Royce and Bentley series, Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud, Bentley S series, and this is one of them. Now this is quite an innovative design. It was designed by a Norwegian called Wilhelm Koren, and what is interesting about it is the body line flows all the way through from the front to the back, all the way through, right along. One of the signature styling tweaks or virtues of Bentley and Rolls-Royce cars of this era was their bulbous wheel arch that flowed round like that. It came up. And this is actually seen on the modern Bentleys. They have gone back to their roots in this sense. It's a styling signature. But what Wilhelm Koren did with this car was completely annihilate that and ended up with this, it's almost like an Elvis TD21 type style, smooth sides, brave new world, fresh outlook, and we've ended up with this design of car. It is quite distinctive. This is the top of the top of the top. This was fearfully expensive in the mid-60s. You bought a Rolls-Royce or Bentley chassis and then had your coach builder of choice put something on top of it. They were probably down to 20 suggestions between all the coach builders. James Young, I think Hooper just about survived at that time, H.J. Mulliner, and got amalgamated with Park Ward. So there were probably half a dozen coach builders at the time to choose from, with a maximum of 20 designs. So it wasn't quite the heady 1930s where you could almost have anything and everything on a Rolls-Royce or Bentley chassis, but nevertheless, very expensive handcrafted car. What I love about this job is it's come in for some restoration work and some recommissioning. We've been right the way through this car visually, and it's in superb condition. The underneath, they were very prone to rust, as all steel cars were in the 1960s and 70s. This one is all the original metalwork, and it's lovely. Quite remarkable. This is quite the thing in its own right, actually. A coach-built Rolls-Royce that's had one owner and 26,000 miles from new. Not many of those left. I think the paintwork's been repainted once in the car's life. The leather interior is a sort of precursor to Magnolia, and we're going to be talking about that with Steve, because one of the things that will cheer the car up enormously is restoring the original leather interior. The carpets can be redone and done again. We're going to take the whole interior out, and Steve is going to to bring that back to life and make it look wonderful again. This particular soft top is the original from the 1960s, so this is 60 years old. It took one man 6 weeks to make these hoods for each of these cars, and they are actually quadruple lined. So they have horsehair linings, they have a head lining inside them. This is actually vinyl, the outside. A lot of people retrim them in mohair, but the original material was vinyl, Everflex in Rolls-Royce speak. And as you can see, 60 years on, it sort of lived up to its name because it's still flexing. So beautiful, just it sits very nicely. We've just put this soft top back up, so that's why it's got these little creases in it which come out with a bit of tension and heat. And but the whole car just reeks of originality. All the woodwork is lovely. As I say, the leather is the 100% factory original. We're going to look into that, but there's just some delightful aspects of this car which really do make it something quite special. I think they made a grand total of about 45 Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud 3 Willem Koren design convertibles, so a very rare car indeed. Just to make the styling look a little more aggressive, they lowered the whole front end, went down 1.5 inches in height to make it just look a bit more rakish, to use a very old word. And the one top tip, if you're looking for perfection with your Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud or Silver Dawn or even Silver Shadow radiator grille, one of the things I was taught over the years in my connections with Rolls-Royce, the radiator shell vanes. This is just a decorative radiator. The real radiator is behind it, out of sight. But the radiator shell actually is worthy of special mention. So we'll just have a look at that now. Well, no Tyrrell's Classic Workshop video would be complete without a bit of nerdiness. And for all the Rolls-Royce and Bentley owners out there of a certain era, and probably of a certain age, did I really say that, will have their note that these vanes are brightly polished on the outside. However, a top tip if you want to win concours or make your car look extra special is to use lots of elbow grease, which is available at your local DIY store, of course, to actually use a metal finishing product like Solvol Autosol or something like that to actually polish the back of the vanes, actually the back. This really does help it helps the reflections of the light bouncing off the radiator vanes, and it's just something I've picked up over the years. We haven't got an example here to show you because we haven't done it for a long time, but if any owner is so inclined, it makes a big difference. Well, one of the areas where we can really improve on this car, we are going to do a full mechanical once-over, but one of the areas we can really improve upon is the leather interior, the original factory Connolly leather interior. And they used between 8 and 11 hides, depending on the exact model of Connolly leather, to make these magnificent interiors. And it is, as ever, a tribute to Connolly that we've got this fantastic canvas to work from all these years later. So we're going to, we've taken the interior out, and we're now going to leather specialist, ex-Connolly trained leather specialist, Steve. Well, having stripped the interior out of the car, this beautiful 24,000 mile old car, I can't think of anybody in the world more qualified and more skilled to have a look at the original leather, no pressure here, than Steve from Leathercare. So Steve, nice to see you again.
And you, my friend.
And we've been doing jobs together for a very long time, haven't we?
1988 was when we left Connolly's to move up to Cheshire, so yeah, been quite a while.
Almost since then, really.
quite a few classic cars have gone.
No,
They weren't worth a lot of money then, but considerably worth a lot more
Yeah,
now.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But you were getting all frothy about this interior.
Yeah, I mean, because when your chap was unloading it, obviously the first thing you kind of was gravitated to was the smell and the kind of mildew that was on it. So it was one of those things where you hope that it's on the surface because you don't want it coming from inside. That's the problem. So the curiosity got the better of me, and I felt I need to wash it just to see what happens with just hot soap and water. And of course, yeah, I was very impressed with it. If there was a sort of a stage where, in anyone's business is where things get excited. This was a period of Connolly's when you just think they got everything right, and you just would not get anything of this period to last like this anymore. It's stunning. Yeah, I did. Like I said, I did a little test area, just out of curiosity to see whether anything was surface, and the results were just, I was just blown away, which is great because it means that when I come to do the sympathetic recolonization, it will be very minimum. I can keep as much of it natural. It will still feel lovely, and it will look lovely. The only problem, well, not a problem, but the only decision I have to make is what shade of white we do it, because obviously, as we mentioned previously, it was a Luxan leather, so it had a slight antiqued effect.
Yes, an interse.
An interse, yes.
Which is like, it's very skilled hand wash that is of a slightly darker colour that's washed over the leather to give it a sort of grained antique, as you put it.
It was a way of emphasising the grain, but it had the adverse effect with customers, because when I used to work for the renovation department, I'd be sent out to these cars constantly because people thought it was ingrained dirt and they just couldn't get it clean. So we would be asked, well, I don't like it, so could you recolonise the whole interior? There's nothing wrong with it. It was stunning, but they just didn't like the fact that it always looked dirty all the time. And because it was all done by hand, because it was all done by hand, it was one of those things that it varied from batch to batch. So you get, sometimes it would be very subtle, and other times it would be very heavy. So if you had run out of leather, you could be in trouble.
Right.
That was the issue. But yeah, it was one of those. Oh, it's stunning, beautiful leather. I'd say the best that they ever produced. Not as supple compared to those stuff, but.
So, but of course, the biggest enemies of classic cars are, number one, lack of use. Yes. Number two, lack of maintenance.
Yes.
Number three, rodent infestation.
Yep.
And number four, dampness is probably. And this. So you've washed this, haven't you? And this is a before. I mean, look at the state of that.
Yes.
But.
Well, we still got the confetti stains, but.
Oh, is that what that is?
Yeah. But that's the problem with things like we used to do it. Probably days when we used to do 3-piece suites, used to get a lot of that New Year party damage with the old party streamers, and it used to leave stains on and you couldn't get it out. It was cheap crepe paper, and the dyes used to leach straight into the leather. So
is that below the level of the seat?
Yes, but I mean, I still might be able to get it out. I'm still hoping, because this was the heavy cellulose coating, that nothing really penetrates through it. It's a great system for that. Unlike modern leathers, where they're not waterproof anymore, they're more water resistant. So if they get too much moisture on them, it will penetrate through. These, it does tend to sit on the surface.
I mean, that's just the difference between that. So that is this mildew then? Basically?
Yes. Yeah. I when I first saw it, just a yellow stain. I just thought it might have been the antiquing in places, but the fact that it washed off, as I say, a good example is these armrests. I mean, that's the befores and after.
So all you've done is wash that?
Just giving it a hot soapy wash at this stage, just out of curiosity. I was just wanted to know what the causes, what it was surface, whether it was, and how good the leather was underneath it.
And we just have to take a breath for a moment, because this leather is 60 years old.
Yes, it's older than me.
You're just showing off now, aren't you? There was no need for that, really. No need at all. But that, considering that's original, untreated, 60-year-old leather, that is utterly amazing.
Yes.
I mean, why would you want to retrim the interior and take away all the natural, lovely leather, which you can't, as you say, you physically can't buy leather
No,
like
no,
that now.
it's just you've got to think back to the days with Connolly's with the vermal leather. They used to take 16 weeks to produce one hide back then. So you wouldn't get any tannery to put that much effort into supplying leather now. And I'll say a lot of the materials, even the finishes, there was about 14 ingredients in the pigments alone in this, which Connolly's kept very, very, because they had their own lacquer plant. They kept it very secret back then. There's only a few people that knew the recipes. And most of those ingredients now, the chemical industry just don't want to be associated with.
Yeah, I get that. I get that.
So you could, even if you knew what the recipe was, you wouldn't get the ingredients to reproduce it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a time capsule that just needs to be kept.
There was, I don't know whether you know this, there was a colour called Regal Red, a beautiful red metallic that Rolls-Royce did in the 1960s, and one of the pigments was whale oil, one of the ingredients. And again, whale oil was used in shock absorbers in certain 1930s and 40s cars. I can't imagine everybody liking that situation nowadays, really. No. But that was the world back then. But that's encouraging. So it could all come up.
Oh, I feel, because my big concern was just how it looks, because obviously I get things that have been painted with various products over the years, and they probably look great for a day. But I want it to feel right as well. And the texture that you've got in this leather has been artificially embossed into it in order to give the hand sort of antiquas a clean, uniform area for the stain to wash into. And because that's printed in the colour, if you take the colour away, you end up removing that texture. And I would like to have kept that. So it's not just a visual thing. I want it to feel right as well. And by keeping a minimal amount of colour on the surface, I can do that.
And so that feels lovely and soft.
It feels lovely already. I mean, it's a thick leather. I mean, you've got to remember, back in the day, that was its beauty now. But the problem was that people wanted more softer leathers. And so they had to change the way that they produce leather to cater for that. More lighter colours, more vibrant,
Yeah, it feels supple but hard, if that makes sense.
Yes, exactly. But they were bought, if everything about this car was built for support. It wasn't about sumptuousness like we are now with our cars. We want to be able to sink into them now. But this was about support. So you had decent interiors, decent frames, and consequently, that was the first thing they ever taught me at Connolly's, was that leather is only as good as the support that's behind it. And the fact that this is so good, the support in this, means that it's still around today.
Right.
If you look at modern Rolls and Bentleys by sort of definition, just the fact that they've got these almost bar sponge interiors now, which they glue the leather to, so as soon as the foam starts to go, it takes the leather with it.
Well, a lot of this would be horsehair, wouldn't it? Horsehair was used for trim in the 60s, particularly 1960s, and then foam started to come in the 70s.
Yeah. But that is the problem, isn't it? I mean, you could find a very skilled trimmer that would be able to retrim this, and obviously you could use Jonathan's leather in order to get it something so it looks right. But there's a lot of other things that go on underneath that you probably still wouldn't be able to get the parts for.
Yes. Yeah.
A lot of the foams that we use then, and as you say, it's just not cost effective.
I brought some swatches with me, and Jonathan Connolly was kind enough to give me this a while back. So right on top here, VM Vomol 3323. There it is, Luxan Grain Vomol. And I'm guessing that would be this colour, would it?
Yeah. Did you check I was going to ask you about. Did you sort of have a look at the bill sheet? Because when I first saw this, when the car itself, I just looked at it and remembered it as being. They refused to refer to it as handbag shading, and I don't know why. That was just something that when I first joined Connolly's, it was referred whenever you had white interiors. They go, "Oh, it's white." I didn't know it was white leather, and they said, "Well, no, it didn't. It was the forerunner to Magnolia." So it was white leather with almost like nicotine rubbed into it, to give it a slightly yellowy hue to it, and obviously over time that varnish wears off, and then the stain wears out, washes out, and then you're left with a whiter base colour.
Because is that Magnolia?
Yeah, that was the forerunner to it. Yeah, I mean, obviously the 3997 became Magnolia, but originally it was the two-tone effect. So this was the base color with the slightly yellowy or
Right.
warmer sort of antique shading.
So, and the interst, the shading, has
Yeah.
actually washed off now,
Yes.
largely.
Yeah.
Is that a little bit of it there still?
Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah, yeah. You can see the sort of white. It goes to a slightly yellowy sort of hue to it, and that's the decision I was trying to think, because when we're trying to antique, well, not so much antique it, when we're trying to retain the authenticity of some of these cars, it's about, I have to use what's available today, and everything today is all water based. So I have to make the water based system emulate some of the old, the old nitrocellulose finishes, and the way we do that is to control is the luster that with the varnish we seal it with has a slight, we can control that from chalky matte all the way through to shiny like a Chesterfield,
Right.
and anywhere in between. So this, because it was an oil based finish, used to have a slight satin look to it, which obviously is what we're left with. So we don't want it chalky matte, otherwise it will just look like it was just being retrimmed in a modern leather.
Yes, I mean that's gorgeous.
It is.
How could anybody want anything
I know.
nicer than that?
Do you know what the thing about it is? If it all washed up like that, I'm tempted, even just saying let's just do that, let's just wash it. But there's going to be more to it, because that's the bits obviously it hasn't had any wear. But when you look at the seat facings, obviously they've got a little bit crispy over the years.
Can we have a look at those? Actually?
Yeah. Well, I've split the driver's one, so you can see obviously
Wow. Look at that.
the line of protection, shall we say?
Sure.
But even so, it's still lovely. I mean, it's still in fantastic condition. The trouble is that what happens is once the colour wears off leather and you're back to this area, is it starts to oxidise. And when you get interiors of this age normally, and when it's been left like this for too long, the upper part of the hide delaminates. Right. So you've got the grain side, which is where obviously the hair follicles were, and then the suede backing. And it's the grain side where the colour sits on and holds the leather together. But once that's broken through, then you're back to suede, then it starts to dry out and oxidise. There is an oil that they drum the hides in, which keeps them moisturised, and then the colour, once they've sealed it, preserves that.
I see. So the likes of this here, what would you feed that and re-oil it?
I would probably go with a tanning oil rather than the feed, because the problem with the feeds is they're beeswax and lanolin, and they're designed not for the leather, they're designed to keep the colour on the surface pliable, so that when the leather moves, the finishes move with them.
Yes.
Because these did used to have an oil in them, and then over time they would dry out and they would bleach.
Right.
And so the hide food was developed to just keep those coatings pliable, so when the leather moved, the finishes move with them.
Right. Gotcha.
So they will work to a point. They will soften. They will soak into the porous part, and they will give you the illusion that it's softened. The issue is that if you come to recolonize it afterwards, is getting anything to fully adhere to it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And the other issue is that in the cellulose stuff, you could colour on top of hide food, and it was all right, But with the water-based system, you may still get an adhesion. But what can happen if you go too heavy with the oil or hide food is it can come back through the colour, and it can remain sticky.
So what are you going to do with this? Just repaint?
I would hope that, like that armrest, this was washed up lovely and supple from a good clean. But my experience is once the leather goes hard and when you're back to the porous part, it's like when you finish with a chamois, it goes hard. So once you're back to the porous part of the leather, this area, it's got a bit of movement now, but it can stiffen up as the leather dries. So I've got kind of little tips and things that I do, like I can get the tanning oil. I've got the tanning oil here, which they drum the hides with, and I've done that in the past, where if I'm using a solvent to try and remove the varnish, I will mix a little bit of the oil into the solvent, so it's working oil into it as I'm taking the surface off. It's not drying the leather out like as thin as wood normally. It will also put some oils back into it as I'm doing that, and then I'd leave it to recover for a bit, and all the emulsifiers to flash out, and then I would just lightly degrease the surface, and then the recolonizing.
It really is. I mean, what you do, we've been doing work together for decades. I am still astonished at what you can pull out of the hat for situations such as this. I mean, so many people they call it Connolly's, but it's actually just spraying car paint on the leather or something.
I mean, we were tried, at Connolly's, we were, rather than just painting leather, we were kind of trained to repeat the final stage the hide went through.
Right.
So, the primer that it used was originally called E-Finish. That was obviously, I've got a kind of water-based equivalent of that now. That's my adhesion coat. So once I've cleaned it and done all the preparation work, the primer is hand applied and doesn't have any solids in it, so it doesn't add to the thickness, the level I'm putting on it. The beauty of that is that when I come to spray the colour, I can spray it directly onto that primer, and it kind of keeps it all nice and pliable. So the problem is, in the old days with Connolly's and their cellulose stuff, was that they used to say work the first application in by hand for your adhesion and then pat out or spray on the second. And the issue with that was that you would end up flooding the first colour, or flood all the cracks and all the grain, and it would just end up with a smooth vinyl. And by having something that doesn't contain any solids as your adhesion coat, you can, if people want to retain all these creases, they still can. And you do really want to, because the problem is they're not just established in the leather, they're in the foam as well.
Yes.
So they're always going to want to crease them.
Exactly. The foam's got to...
Yeah.
It's what's happening underneath that's caused that.
If you wanted to try and minimise that, you need to get this cover off and then re-laminate your horseshoe, just to sort of create a nice fresh surface behind it.
Yeah.
But if they're going to come back through, you want them to remain as creases. So I'm more inclined to wash a little bit of colour into those and keep them as creases that are pliable.
Yes.
Then try and flood them out, as we used to do back in the day when people wanted to make them look like new leather, and pretend there was nothing wrong with it.
But that gives it a finite life, doesn't it?
Yeah, because the moment you put in that much colour on it, you've now got 2 layers of colour for it to crack through. You see, so it will crack through twice as deep. And quite often than not, when you get worse cracks than this, you do that, and they go from deep cracks to splits very quickly.
Yeah.
So.
This is getting very technical, but that's what people ask for on the channels. So here we are. That's obviously the back seat behind you there.
Yep.
And that looks...
that's not, as we say, we've got a few spills and things on it, but generally, you can just see it's just got that, it's stunning. It's beautiful leather. I think obviously this has been covered up quite well, so that's a good indication of the slight yellowiness.
Right.
But as you can see, it's not as creamy as those modern swatches.
Yes.
Whoops. That's all quite, very subtle. But that, there's 2 ways that I'm kind of tempted. Part of me wants to just do it a solid colour, of what that is really, because that's just lovely, which I could do. But the other thing just says I want to put a little bit of colour into the varnish that I seal it with, a little bit of yellow, to give it this afterwards,
just to tone it down.
Yeah, and it will also give it a slightly, take the newness out of the colour.
Right.
It will have this still a bit of a slightly shaded antique effect, but very, very subtle.
Well, as ever, I will leave it up to you. I mean, look at that. I mean, the car's done 24,000 miles. That back seat looks as though it's never been sat in.
But as you said, horsehair, springs, it's not going to happen now, is it? I mean, it's just lovely. And it's just so nice when you do get something. And I'm with you, yes, it's a low mileage car, but I've had cars that have been badly stored. And it doesn't matter whether they've only done a few miles. The fact is that because they've been stored in the wrong conditions, the leather just deteriorates very quickly. Yes. Leather likes to be used. If you think about an old pair of boots that, once you first put them on, after several years, they pinch and it's stiff, and then a couple of, half an hour or so moving about, they come back to life again.
Yes.
And that's what leather is. So you can put all the feeds and all the oils you want into this, but what actually will get leather going nice and supple is use. Yes. Or as Myers Governor used to say, bums on seats. Yeah. That's what
that's... Thank you very much, Steve. Well, I look forward very much to seeing this when it's done. You've got a bit, I can't think of somebody I'd rather have doing this.
I'm looking forward to it, as I say, because normally by the time they get to me at this sort of age, they need panels putting in. I do horseshoes, they do foams repacking. So to actually have something that's still got some life in it, this is great, that isn't delaminating. It means I can just go very supple with it and keep, and it will just keep it. But I think, to be honest with you, I think it's one of those things that's going to look better a year or 2 down the line.
Right.
When a few of the creases come back, gets a bit of patina back, then it will look like a stunning, well looked after car. And,
great.
I think that's going to be when it's going to look at its best.
Steve, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
I won't take up any more of your time. I'll let you crack on with it. It's very great. It's very great. Yes, to see you so fired up about it yourself. So great. I'll leave it with you. Thanks very much indeed, and we'll get on with the rest of the car. See if we can do your work justice. Okay.
I'm sure you will.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Well, that concludes another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop video. Please like, please subscribe, and we will be back with something else very soon.